Hello, I'm Kimberlie Acosta, and welcome to the Native News Update. It's Monday, December 6th. Many of the stories you hear here can be found at our website, IndianCountryNews.com. And here's the news for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Authorities are offering a $2,500 reward for information about vandals who spray-painted graffiti over prehistoric rock art at the Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area in Nevada. The maroon and white paint covers pictographs drawn by ancient inhabitants and petroglyphs scraped and ground long ago into rocks at the scenic preserves about 17 miles west of the Las Vegas Strip. The Federal Bureau of Land Management is working with Las Vegas police to investigate what officials are calling one of the most damaging incidents of vandalism at Red Rock in years. A conviction under the Archaeological Resource Protection Act can result in 5 years in prison and a $100,000 fine. The drawings could date back to AD 1000 and were probably made by the known prehistoric archaeological cultures that lived in the area, such as the Virgin Anasazi or the Paiute. Hikers visiting from Oregon reported that the graffiti found less than a half a mile from the main road that twists across Red Rock in early November. The graffiti includes the words Red Rock 2010, and Nevada has chronic sprawled across several rock formations. A federal advisory committee has recommended that the University of Pennsylvania return a trove of Native American artifacts it acquired nearly 90 years ago from a clan of Tlingit people in southeast Alaska. The recommendation last month regarding the collection of more than 40 items, among them headdresses, carved masks, and ceremonial horns, is not binding on Penn's Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. The museum has offered instead to turn over 8 of the objects, allowing the clan to serve as curator of the rest. Clan members say if that is the museum's best offer, they will take the matter to court. Such disputes are becoming more common since the passage of the 1990 federal law requiring museums to return certain Native American artifacts and human remains. But this case has a curious wrinkle that it evokes a painful era when the Tlingit and other tribes were pressured to abandon the old ways. Penn's collection was bought from the Tlingit people by one of their own. Tlingit member Louis Shotridge first came to Philadelphia in 1912 for a temporary job building models, documenting artifacts, and speaking to museum goers. In 1915, Shotridge was named an assistant curator of the Anthropology Museum. He bought most of the items involved in the current dispute during a trip in 1924, apparently from a Tlingit leader named Archie White, though there is no direct evidence White was the seller. And today we talk with Paul DeMain, who is in Rapid City, South Dakota, covering the John Graham trial for the murder of the 1975 Native American activist Annie Mae Aquash. Hi, Paul. Do you want to give us some information on what's happening in the Aquash trial this week?
Kim, the trial resumed this morning on Monday, December 6th, with the resumption of the testimony of Kamuk Nichols Ekafi. And basically the biggest thing that happened this morning right away was that judge reversed his own ruling last Friday, which prevented Kamuk Nichols from testifying about hearing Leonard Peltier brag about shooting the agents. The judge apparently went back to his statute books and read the law and decided that Kamuk could testify as to what she heard Peltier said, even though it doesn't make what Peltier said the truth of the matter, is how they ruled it. And so she did testify this morning that her sister Darlene, her sister Bernie Lafferty, and Annie Mae Pictou Aquash and Dennis Banks were all present in the Marlo Brando motorhome in November of 1975 when Peltier bragged about shooting the agents. And what's significant about that in regards to the Graham's murder charges and cases is that they're attempting to show that this bragging then provided a motive for members of the American Indian movement, and including Leonard Peltier, to move against Aquash if they believed that she was a government informant. The defense attorney, Murphy, attempted throughout this morning's testimony to show that Annie Mae was being included in making bombs. She was being curried around almost 6 months from the time that Peltier first interrogated her in Farmington in 1975. For the next 6 months, Dennis Banks and Leonard worked with her, got her helped build bombs, helped in Marlo Brando motorhome, and basically Murphy was trying to establish, well, in that case, they must have trusted her. Kamuk did testify that the reason that they had her building bombs and had her close by was to keep an eye on her and to perhaps implicate a government provocateur in the commission of a crime, which would hopefully then get Dennis Banks and Leonard Peltier off the charge if Aquash was an informant. So it's an interesting scenario. The defense also hammered away at the reimbursements that Nichols was provided for by the FBI in the year 2003 and the year 2004, a total of $42,000, which encompassed two major moves for security reasons. And Murphy kept referring to it as being paid by the FBI and more than you made during that year for income, and whether or not she claimed it for taxes and all that. She got through the majority of that, I think, through testifying that it was reimbursements for actual expenses, airline tickets at a time when she was doing wires for the FBI. After Kamuk was done, you got any questions about that?
In regards to Kamuk, you said that that was Dennis Banks' wife at the time?
Yes, she was married to Dennis Banks. She met him at before Wounded Knee in 1973 when she was 17 years old. They were a couple in Wounded Knee in 73. They have 4 children together, and she lived with him up until 1989. Murphy tried to insinuate and ask her whether she was informant A or B, 2 informants that reported on the movements of the Marlo Brando motorhome. Essentially, she was saying he was trying to get her to say, look, you were working for the FBI here in the last decade. Were you either informant A or B, insinuating that it was her that was working for the FBI way back then. It basically didn't work. Kamuk came across as a credible witness from inside the movement.
And was there any other testimony this morning?
Yes, they brought in Dickie Marshall is how he's known, Richard Marshall. He was acquitted of aiding and abetting first-degree murder this spring in a trial, allegedly for providing the gun. The judge ruled that he would testify today. He indicated, first of all, that he would not incriminate himself and take the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. The state gave him immunity for anything that he would admit to in terms of criminal actions except perjury. And so the judge said he would testify, he would test truthfully. If he was charged with perjury, he would be convicted. He would go back to prison on 3 strikes you're out under the Montalou murder case that he confessed to and is now out on parole. So he's had 2 strikes already. He's got 1 strike left. If he's convicted of anything, including contempt of court, he could go back to prison for the rest of his life on a parole violation. He did testify today. He did admit that Theda Nelson Clark came to his house with a girl, that she wanted him to stay there. But basically, he pled bad memory about a dozen times this morning. It was a long time ago. I didn't know these people. I never met Annie Mae before. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who the girl was. But interesting enough, he said that he attended Annie Mae's wake in February of 1976. So it was an interesting situation where Dick Marshall ended up going to the wake of a woman he had never met before and didn't know, and didn't even, wasn't even sure if it was her at his house.
Did they ask him about the gun?
They asked him directly about the gun. He was declared a hostile witness. And they asked him if he provided the gun. He said, no. Did you provide the shells? No. Why did you go back in the bedroom? I didn't go back in the bedroom. Everyone was in the living room. We never went in the back room. I didn't know these people. I didn't do anything. But then, interesting enough, he said, well, my wife, if you want to talk about it, Cleo Gates will remember things much, much better about what happened. And she testified that Dick Marshall, Theda Nelson Clark, Arlo Looking Cloud, John Boy Graham went back into the back room, and that when he came out, he told Cleo, his wife, that they wanted him to keep Annie Mae there and that they wanted to tie her up. He says he has no memory of that whatsoever, but basically vouched for the credibility of his wife and her memory. So they're right now have a mix and match between Cleo Gates's testimony and Dick Marshall's testimony. The question is whether or not it surmounts or is impeachable as a perjury charge is a question. So that's where we are today. We're going to go back this afternoon here shortly. My understanding is that the judge is going to hold a competency hearing for Theda Nelson Clark.
Wow, that's pretty big. She's the one that she's in a nursing home, correct?
She's been in the nursing home from time to time. She's claimed that she has no memory of anything going on, but people have her in the casinos playing. They have her calling up witnesses and threatening witnesses and so forth. And Pearsall in federal court declared her competent earlier this year. They're going to see what we get out of the situation. In line at the particular moment now is Bob Ekefee is due to testify. Mitch Purrier, two people who went to Canada to interview John Boy Patton Graham in the future. There may be Cyril Chapman as a prosecution witness, but it seems like they're getting pretty close on the prosecutional side to rest this case. We'll have to see where it goes.
Well, thank you, Paul, and we'll talk again with you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Kim.
And that's the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. I'd like to thank you for joining me, and have a grand day.